Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. In the year 2176, the planet Mars is home to over 600,000 people. These colonizers live in a matriarchal society, where everything is connected to the city of Christ by autonomous trains. Rumors of something sinister in the southern region begin to concern the authorities. The last incident was the arrival of the train Yankee 74. It came from the mines of Shining Canyon with a single passenger, Lieutenant Melanie Ballard, a member of an escort sent to retrieve a prisoner. She was unconscious and in handcuffs when found. Besides superficial injuries, her tests indicated recent use of an illegal substance. Melanie presents herself to the authorities to give her statement, starting her story from the previous Friday. Riding on the Yankee 74, the escort team faces a sandstorm just before reaching the Southern Valley. Sergeant Jericho Butler spends time playing cards with a rookie officer named Michael Descanso. The other newcomer is Bashira Kincaid, who has just calculated the delay caused by the storm and wakes Commander Helena Braddock to inform her. Discreetly, Melanie takes a pill she hid in the pendant of her necklace and begins to plunge into maritime delusions. She snaps out of her trance with a reprimand from Helena. The commander orders Melanie to sober up before they arrive at the precinct. The detainee to be transferred is James Desolation Williams, and this is his third homicide charge. He got away with the first two by claiming self-defense, but Helena says that won't fly this time. James attacked several people at a train station before arriving at Shining Canyon with a crazy story. Lowering her voice, she asks Melanie to give her best, as Bashira lacks experience and the other two are men. In addition to the prejudiced comment, Helena does not hide her tendency to take advantage of pretty police officers under her command. 40 minutes from Shining Canyon, everyone starts to prepare. Talking to Melanie, Jericho questions that familiarity with the commander, and she admits there will be a price to pay if she wants to be promoted. But when the sergeant says Helena has good taste, Melanie is offended by the compliment. Arriving at their destination, the conductor informs that the Yankee 74 will return to the station at 10 o'clock at night. The officers disembark, and Helena reminds everyone that they still need to wear respirators in open areas. The group finds the village's silence strange, but Helena is not too worried and splits them into two teams to expedite operations. Jericho and Melanie go to the precinct and find no one there besides the prisoners. Melanie sees James on the cameras, but there is no way to open the cell door without the guards. So, she decides to consult with the commander. On the way, they suspect the flashing lights in a warehouse and enter to check. The place is in complete disarray and filled with signs of struggle. As Melanie cautiously advances down the hallway, Jericho notices some odd details. Several sharp objects seem to have been used to construct some kind of defense or trap. Feeling something on her leg, the lieutenant is startled to see an arm stretching toward her, but soon discovers the rest is not around. Realizing this is not a task for two, they decide to search for the others. But then Michael appears at the warehouse door, even more frightened than they are. He was at the village recreation center and says it's even worse there. The victims are hanging from the ceiling, all beheaded. The group gathers at the precinct, where Helena informs them that the entire village is in the same situation and there seem to be no survivors. Bashira appears very shaken and warns that she cannot contact the train crew. While Jericho tries to unlock the prison doors, Helena mentions something even stranger. She says James's last victims were also found on the ceiling, just like the people at the recreation center. When Jericho unlocks access to the cells, the commander begins checking the inmate list and discovers there is one woman too many. Her cellmates reveal that she arrived asking to be incarcerated. Forced to wake up, the woman answers Helena's questions begrudgingly. She is Dr. Arlene Whitlock, in charge of mining at Drucker's Ridge. A week ago, there was a riot in town, and Arlene escaped in a weather monitoring balloon that she built herself. The storm hit her right over Shining Canyon, and the balloon ended up crashing. Melanie and Jericho go to James's cell to see if he knows what happened there, but he merely ignores the two. On the way back, they find Bashira pointing her weapon at a closed door and hear knocks from the other side. The whole group positions themselves before Jericho opens the door, and then a woman collapses to the floor. She seems to be possessed, and we see she can see the police officers through a red light. They take her to a back room of the precinct while Melanie and Helena go out to look for more clues. The two find a vehicle parked and are startled when a man appears in the window. Melanie calls Jericho on the radio while Helena shoots at the door, trying to open it. At that moment, someone runs past Helena, and the commander decides to pursue the suspect. Melanie is shocked to see the man choose not to be rescued alive. When Jericho arrives, she recounts that she read the deceased's lips and he seemed to be pleading for them not to enter there. Inside the vehicle, something watches the two through that same red light. In a wise decision, Jericho says it's better to believe the deceased and keep that door tightly shut. He also reminds them that the two rookies are alone and suggests she stay with them while he looks for Helena. When Melanie arrives at the precinct, James is holding Bashira hostage. Michael explains that she let him out to eat, falling into the trap. Telling the criminal that the girl is just a rookie, Melanie offers to stay in her place. As the two switch positions, the lieutenant disarms James and even kicks him. However, he responds with a punch that knocks her out. When she awakens, Michael is at the door saying he saw James enter a clinic. Melanie tells the two rookies to guard the back door while she enters from the front. Inside, the patients seem to have been infected by the same sickness as the woman at the precinct. They also see Melanie through the red light, and some appear to be in a more advanced stage of aggression. One attacks the lieutenant, and then James emerges from hiding to save her. He tries to keep her in his sights, but another patient grabs him next. Melanie also saves him before taking him back to his cell despite his protests. Claiming innocence, he says he only went to the train station to eat something before heading on. We see this is not exactly true. James planned to rob the station but really only arrived there after the catastrophe. Seeing a bag full of money sitting on the counter, he didn't think twice and tells Melanie that she would do the same. She admits she even believes his story but insists her duty is still to take him to Christ to convince a jury of his innocence. Jericho is still searching for the commander in the village when he spots someone running and decides to follow. To his horror, he arrives at a row of stakes where dozens of heads are displayed. Moreover, the person running there has just added Helena's head. Then Jericho hears a war cry coming from the mines and hides to observe. The miners seem to have gone mad. Covered in war paint and even parts of other people, they shout and shake their weapons in front of a horrendous figure who is clearly the leader. Some unconscious people are dragged toward him, and he mercilessly brings down his sword, sending the crowd into a frenzy. Horrified by the spectacle, he calls Melanie on the radio and tells her what happened with the commander. She gets very upset and decides to interrogate Arlene Whitlock with a bit more firmness. The scientist begins to explain that there are organisms capable of hibernating for long periods underground. She thinks something similar is happening on Mars. The colonizers are being infected by something unknown that should not have been disturbed. As she speaks, the doorknob beside her begins to move. Michael arrives warning that Jericho is bringing 3 survivors there. When Melanie steps aside to talk to him, Arlene stands right in front of the door. Then, one of the infected suddenly emerges from the darkness. The lieutenant takes out the threat with 5 shots, but Arlene says the danger hasn't passed. When the host dies, the Martian parasite simply exits it and looks for the next one. This means that the dreadful organism is in the air among them at that very moment. The others don't know yet, but it has just entered through the ear of one of the prisoners named Benchley. Then Jericho arrives with the 3 survivors who saved him from a barbarian attack right after he spoke with Melanie. They recount that they were in the mines the night before when everyone received the order to halt work. The storm hit that area, dumping red dust on the workers, and they all collapsed unconscious for quite some time. When they woke up, many had been completely transformed, exhibiting irrational and violent behavior. Those who were not affected became the first victims of barbarism. Jericho was the first uninfected person to pass by since then, and that's why the trio decided to save him. Additionally, they also gave him a bag of detonators they found there. Jericho asked if they had weapons, but they replied that only the police are allowed to be armed. After hearing the account, Melanie says it's better to get out of there soon. But as soon as she mentions James Desolation Williams, the 3 survivors reveal that they are armed. In fact, they are James's accomplices who came to Shining Canyon to free him. Under the aim of one of them, Melanie unlocks James's cell and removes his handcuffs. While the criminals celebrate the plan and reminisce, she simply shuts the door again, incarcerating all four at once. Even armed, they don't have much way to threaten her, as they need her to get out, and no one wants to be trapped in the middle of a potential apocalypse. James convinces the three idiots to hand over all the weapons and promises that the gang will obey the lieutenant's orders if she agrees to get them out of there. Leaving the cell, James makes the formal introductions and says that his friends are named Uno, Dos, and Trace. Still unsettled by the turn of events, Uno tries to intimidate the lieutenant even without a weapon but quickly regrets it. She twists his arm and forces him to say that she is in charge there. Once that issue is resolved, the group goes to the other cell to recruit the remaining inmates, and Melanie notices that Benchley is infected. Leaving the unfortunate behind, she takes the other two, Akushe and Zimmerman. The weapons are distributed among the group, and the detonators are used to make homemade grenades from food cans. Trying to impress Akushe, Dos ends up suffering an accident and loses some fingers. As soon as everyone is prepared, Melanie says that Jericho and Michael will go ahead. It's 50 meters to the train station, and it's almost 10 o'clock at night. Exiting the precinct, the group sees that the train is not there and starts to get worried. Suddenly, the buildings on the other side of the village begin to explode, and on this side, the barbarians appear on top of the houses, striking combat poses. As the group starts to move, they throw their improvised weapons in their direction. Zimmerman is hit and doesn't survive. The rest manages to reach the station, but still, there's no train in sight. Losing patience, James announces that it's time for Plan B, and everyone begins to open fire on the possessed warriors. The newly made grenades cause great damage, and the infected descend from the roof for hand-to-hand combat as chaos erupts. James notices that Uno has been contaminated by the red dust and is already transforming. Trace also succumbs soon after. And then, dozens of infected appear at the top of the southern wall, along with the leader. With little choice, the group returns to the precinct. Michael tries to resist a little longer but eventually loses his head. Regretting his losses, James reveals to Melanie that Uno was his brother. As the possessed march toward the precinct, Arlene explains her new findings. The red dust is spreading through the cities along with the sandstorm. And there's no point in wiping out the infected, as each time one dies, the particles just travel through the wind to attack the next. She reveals that she was in the Drucker's Ridge mines when the work stoppage was announced due to a scientific discovery. The explosions in a mountain revealed a tunnel that had been sealed for centuries. It wasn't a natural structure but a remnant of a Martian civilization. At the end of the tunnel was an inscription in an unknown language, and when Arlene touched the relief, the entire wall crumbled, spreading the red dust throughout the tunnel. The scientist then admits that this is, in part, her fault. Bashira warns that she managed to contact the train and says the delay is due to a blockage on the tracks that is being resolved. Jericho thinks it's time to try to arrange another transport, but Melanie still prefers to wait for the train. Watching the explosions on the cameras, James disagrees with the idea. While Bashira grimly watches Benchley, Jericho says he has something to show Melanie. She is indignant when she realizes he only wanted a moment alone. However, when Jericho argues that this could literally be the end of the world, she begins to consider the offer. The two kiss, but the romance doesn't withstand the sound of gunfire inside the precinct. The two discover that Bashira has lost control and shot Benchley, unknowingly doing the last thing she should have done. The dust quickly leaves him and passes through the cell bars in search of a new host. This time, the chosen one is Melanie. With little alternative, her colleagues rush to take her outside as fast as possible. James even returns her necklace, which he had discreetly stolen a few minutes earlier. Knowing what is in the pendant of the necklace, Jericho makes the lieutenant swallow one of the pills, hoping to confuse the demonic dust with the intoxicating substance. Without much faith in the result, he goes back inside with James. The two forces begin to clash in her mind until the maritime delusions prevail, and the parasite is expelled. Melanie comes back to herself and sees that she is unarmed, left outside, and in a completely vulnerable situation. When one of the possessed attacks her, she has to defend herself only with kicks and punches. After defeating him, she ties his sword to a rope and climbs the precinct wall, jumping into the outer courtyard. Jericho and James manage to see her on the camera, pleading for her to let them in. Remembering that the infected seem to forget English during possession, they realize that the lieutenant is healed and allow her entry. Then Melanie explains the experience in detail, recounting terrible visions of destruction. The red dust is indeed a living organism, and its goal is to annihilate any and all races trying to dominate its planet. Through the cameras, Bashira warns that the horde of warriors is up to something outside. Melanie sees that they are about to invade the precinct and tells everyone to run to the back of the building. She and James will stay at the entrance to hold back the attack as long as they can. In an organized effort, the possessed manage to break down the door and begin to enter. The narrow corridor is a significant advantage, forcing the invaders to advance in line, getting mowed down one by one. When the duo runs out of ammunition, Jericho and Bashira take over the front line. The biggest danger remains the dust, as each enemy that falls increases the risk of contamination. When the fight reaches the back of the building, Melanie manages to barricade the door with a gallon, but the leader enters through the ceiling right afterward. Exploding the gallon, she sets it on fire before passing to the courtyard. While Jericho tries to get a vehicle to work, Bashira climbs one of the towers and reports that the train is stopped at the station. When the leader recovers and resumes the attack, Jericho has managed to start the engine, and everyone squeezes into the vehicle. They then cross the main street, knocking down everything and everyone in their path until they reach the train station. Fending off the warriors with grenades, Melanie clears space for the survivors to board. Besides her and Jericho, only Bashira, Arlene, and James are left. Everyone gets on the car, and the train begins to move, but then Melanie changes her mind. She says the dust has already traveled long distances to Shining Canyon, and it's just a matter of time before it covers the entire planet. As tempting as it may be to escape the fight now, it will only delay the problem. James is the first to agree with the idea, as he prefers to die fighting than fleeing. Soon the others are convinced too, and the train changes direction. The plan is to blow up the nuclear power plant at Shining Canyon to rid themselves of the threat once and for all. Arlene says there's no guarantee this will stop the dust, but nobody has a better idea. Then, Melanie gets off the train with Jericho and Arlene, running to the plant while the others try to distract the possessed. Through binoculars, Melanie sees that the plan is not going well, as the warriors have already noticed the movement at the plant. She warns the others on the radio, and the train comes to them while Jericho finishes preparing the explosives. Even the conductor joins the fight and, unfortunately, ends up getting hit. As Melanie and Jericho fight to reach the train, the dust contaminates Arlene. Bashira bravely resists until one of the slicing discs hits her squarely. Jericho is also knocked down and ferociously attacked by a group of possessed. Only James and Melanie manage to return to the train, shutting the door before the dust can infiltrate. Now they need to get out of there before the explosion, which could spread over almost a kilometer. James takes the wheel, and the train departs again, with some warriors hitching a ride on the outside. Noticing the presence of the stowaways, he tells Melanie to drive while he handles the dynamite situation. Worried about how long he's taking to return, the lieutenant opens the train door, and one of the infected jumps inside. James also faces issues outside as the leader has already found him. The two fight on top of the moving train until James separates the cars, leaving his opponent behind. The rear cars explode shortly after, and Melanie manages to expel the unwanted passenger as well. The train reaches the necessary distance seconds before the nuclear explosion. Finally safe, James begins tending to Melanie's injuries, saying he never imagined becoming friends with a police officer. The lieutenant promises to help him clear the wrongful charges, but James prefers not to take the risk. At the first opportunity, he cuffs her wrist and jumps off the train. This is the end of Melanie's account to the authorities. The lieutenant is released to rest in the infirmary, while we see a cloud of red dust approaching the city. In the middle of the night, Melanie wakes to the emergency alarm warning that Chryse is under attack. Hearing screams outside, she keeps an eye on the door while she dresses. But the one who enters is not a possessed warrior but her new combat partner, James. He throws a weapon to her, and the two prepare to face another fight.